Okay. So I think I'm going to kick off because, as I said, we've got a very short hour and we want to cover a lot of things. So as most of you know, my name is Leslie Painter-Farrell. I'm a teacher trainer at Westchester Community College. I want to welcome you to the Westchester Community College English Language Institute webinar series. That's a mouthful, but it's an important mouthful. It's been something that we've been doing for a few years now, supported by Claudia Carco and the Aberlees Foundation. So I want to say thank you before we even begin to Sophia and Joseph Aberlees Endowed Chair for English as a Second Language. That's the fund that's able to support this very important work of professional development. So I'm happy to do that. I'm also extremely happy to introduce Dr. JASMIN Cowin today. We're colleagues of old from New York State TESOL. She's an associate professor for TESOL and Bilingual Programs at Touro College Graduate School of Education. Her focus is on the responsibility to Touro students teaching, responsibility to discipline, scholarship, responsibility to community service. She serves to inspire students, and I think we're all going to be inspired today by what she's going to tell us about AI. As you know, the title is Interviewing the Future, Teaching and Learning in 2050. So I'm now going to be quiet because I'm really excited to know what we will be doing in 2050. I think I will still be teaching then. So I'll be interested. Right. Handing over to you, JASMIN.
Thank you, Leslie. I remember with fond memories our nice TESOL events where I was chair of a conference, and those are very happy memories because we served our profession together and we made bonds and we formed bonds, which is something, if there is a student here, it is important that you join your associations because that is where you meet not just your colleagues, but your future employers and your future recommenders. That is how you build a network, a peer learning network. So thank you also to the Assistant Dean for joining this. So interviewing the future, language teaching and learning in 2050. So ladies and gentlemen and fellow New York State TESOL educators, it's an honor and really a privilege to speak to you today at this moment in what I consider educational history. As TESOL educators, we've always been at the forefront of bridging cultures and breaking down language barriers and fostering global understanding. And today, we find ourselves on the cusp of a new world order, the AI age, the age of artificial intelligence. And it promises not just to reshape our world, how we teach, but also how our students and our future generations learn and interact with the world. So I want to go and set a couple of contexts. History has been shaped by significant natural events that have irrevocably altered the landscape that we currently inhabit. And a striking example is the Sanklian megaflood, which took place over 5 million years ago. When the Atlantic Ocean breached the Strait of Gibraltar and refilled the desiccated Mediterranean basin, it did so in a geological instant, flooding over 1.2 million square kilometers. And this monumental event serves as a reminder of the inherent unpredictability of natural systems, where seemingly small changes like tectonic plates moving like a couple of inches can trigger catastrophic consequences. Fast forward to today, and we find ourselves on the precipice of another form of disruption, not geologically, but in the digital space, driven by AI systems. Just as the megaflood reshaped continents, AI has the potential to fundamentally alter the way we live, learn, and work. I want to set some context. You might have heard of it. The concept of singularity. So I want to touch on that for you. What happens when artificial intelligence surpasses human intelligence, leading to exponential technological growth that is uncontrollable and irreversible? Kurzweil has written about it. So the singularity, which right now is something that is considered to be like in the future, represents a critical juncture beyond which the future becomes unpredictable, much like the sudden transformations during and following the Sanklian flood. Both scenarios expose the tension between untamable forces, natural or digital, that can swiftly transcend predictions or oversight. So anything that I talk to about today can change in an instant. 2050, this is where we're going. Welcome. 2050, the first generation of the artificials. As we look towards the future, new generations of learners will emerge. Learners who will interact with AI from birth and whose cognitive development will be shaped by this technology. I'm referring to them as the artificials, a term that was coined by Sarah Diker in her article, Human Educators in 2050, anticipating the artificials. These individuals will experience their world where AI is seamlessly integrated into everyday life, not just as a tool, but as a constant companion. Unlike previous generations like us, who witnessed the gradual integration of technology into education, the artificials will never know a world without it. They will rely on AI not just for learning, but for memory, decision-making, communication, leading to new ways of acquiring and processing knowledge. Unlike previous generations, like us, that experienced the gradual evolution of technology, artificials will be immersed in a world where AI is ubiquitous and deeply embedded in everyday experiences and possibly physical manifestations via cybernetic implants or bioenhancements. These refer to modifications involving technologies integrating into the body to enhance or augment physical or cognitive abilities. The broader field that studies such integrations is often referred to as cybernetics or human augmentation. And you might say, oh my God, she's far out, but I'm not. Just think of cochlear implants. Just think of the diabetes pump that like monitors and gives insulin. And now step one step further, automated measurement of your insulin is just one thing. You know, your thyroid could be monitored, your cognitive state could be monitored. Everything can and possibly will be monitored. Yet Dewey reminds us that the first great consideration is that life goes on in an environment, not merely in it, but because of it, through interaction with it. No creature lives merely under its skin. Its subcutaneous organs are a means of connection with what lies beyond its bodily frame, and to which, in order to live, it must adjust itself by accommodation and defense, but also by conquest. Dewey in 1958. Maybe he knew something that we don't. Very good. So I have created via DALL-E these various scenarios for you while I speak to kind of see where I see all of this going, right? So I am trying to do a multimodal sort of presentation, not with text, but where the pictures accompany what my thoughts are. The artificials and our possible future. The artificials' cognitive development might be marked by their dependency on AI as a constant companion, shaping their approach to learning, decision-making, and communication from infancy. And who hasn't seen parents who give their little children already at the age of 1 or 2 a large screen at dinner? Actually, I wonder why they all go out to start with it. Everybody is on a device. There's no more communication happening. But I want you to think about this. Instead of mom and dad talking to their child and interacting with each other, the only interaction that's going on at many tables when you visually like look around you is with that screen. So this is that communication from infancy that I'm talking about. So these artificials will not just use technology, they might actually exist within it. Traditional educational frameworks that once focused on human-centric learning will have to adapt. AI will play a large role in the classroom, automating routine tasks such as creating rubrics and grading, while providing personalized instruction that adjusts to the learner's needs. And I'll get to that in a second. However, this evolution also raises critical questions about language educators' roles. While AI can enhance learning experiences, it cannot replace the human qualities of empathy, creativity, and the ability to inspire critical thinking. So think about this. You have a student who is stuck. Putting them in front of a screen does not unstick them. Never works. They look at it, they don't get it. In order to get it, you or we as educators transcend that space between us and we see the problem from their eyes. And then we help to unstick them. This is not an AI issue. This is a human issue, right? An AI is simply an algorithm. It has no empathy. It is not a person. And anthropomorphizing an AI and saying it is like a person is not serving us well, and it is not giving the right frame of perception towards what the AI really represents. So educators will need to find ways to integrate AI into learning while preserving our irreplaceable human dimensions. So you see here, I have like two pictures, how I sort of envision, what it might look like, where you have like a wide open space and you have sort of like almost holograms or 3D spaces. And you know what? 30 years ago, that was almost unimaginable. But many of those things that we saw on Star Trek, we've got them now, right? So this is not so far away from us. So let's look at it. So AI's integration into the lives of the artificials will have profound effects on their cognitive abilities and learning preferences. One of the major cognitive shifts will be enhancing multitasking capabilities driven by AI's role in handling routine tasks and information management. AI-supported devices will allow learners to split their attention across multiple modes of input without the cognitive overload typically associated with multitasking in prior generations. Kim et al. Write about an individual AI tutor as an integrated system of 3 developmental learning networks, DLNSs, by extending a deep adaptive resonance theory, which is a neural network capable of incremental learning. So we are now co-dependent on each other. Consequently, multimodal learning, the integration of visual, auditory, and tactile inputs might become the preferred mode of engagement. The artificials will expect learning experiences to be interactive, adaptive, and visually engaging, facilitated by AI-driven content, which is very problematic because we know that AI has a lot of biases. So when we look at where we are, we need to center ourselves. So you say, well, we don't have these people in our classrooms. That is not true. We already have digital natives in our classroom who seem to be very reluctant of opening a book, but instead will flit through screens. They are not staying a long time with materials. When you observe our students, it's almost like the Tinder of education, right? Flip, 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 flip. Next screen, flip, flip. But it's very hard to get them to focus in depth on any subject unless they find a passion for it or unless it's humanly led. So if you just give everybody a screen, there is no way to really gauge the interaction with the materials. So that is the problem that we are having right now. When I go and I observe students and people say, well, we have iLearn or we have this or we have that. That's all wonderful. I am not, I'm not questioning the usefulness of it, but having 20 students sitting in front of a computer, staring at that computer, and saying they were able to solve sequentially the following steps has no indication of their long-term memory of what they learned that afternoon, because long-term memory is not constructed like that, right? So yes, they were able to solve after 1 hour of hanging out with this computer program and answer all of those questions. But let's see, were they able to recall all of what they learned, let's say on Monday, on Friday? Probably not. A good teacher, however, scaffolds and then has a review process where they figure out on Friday how much stuck, right? That's what we do. We figure out, did it stick? And if it didn't stick, where are the holes? Where when we look at our classroom, where do we see the greatest deficits in terms of what the memory loss was? And then we go home and we think about how to address that, because we have more units of study the next week, but we are able to integrate the pieces. Maybe it was a grammar point that just didn't stick, and integrate it next week. That is not how AI works. Collaborative learning environments in which AI acts as a tutor and facilitator might redefine traditional teacher-student dynamics, promoting more and different interactive learning experiences. So intelligent tutor systems, ITSs, can be used to simulate one-to-one personal tutorings. But what does that really mean? That also means that whatever this ITS is, right? If it's an intelligent tutoring system, it will know a lot about your students. It will know a lot more than you think it knows, because anything that they put in is now becoming part of that, of the information capture. And we rarely understand the black box behind the programs that we use. So I've never had a discussion with a provider of any such systems, asking them, where does the data go? How much do you really know about our students, and what do you do with the data afterward? So these are going to be important questions in the future to ask. So we have here something that I put together, a neural virtual environment integration, which I think is going to be something that might be happening in the future, because if you have context-aware language exposure and adaptive difficulty scaling with real-time error correction, that is a neural virtual environment integration. Then you might have augmented social interactions. That's when you go into metaverses, where you might have AI-mediated language exchanges, cultural simulation environments, and dynamic conversation partners. What am I talking about? So let's say that you have a metaverse. There are many around, right? You might have digital twins who are automated agents, not chatbots, an automated agent. And they are now engaging in an AI-mediated language exchange and a cultural simulation in a dynamic conversation with a real student of yours. And they make independent and independent decisions, these automated agents. The problem is that they are also gathering all kinds of data. Next, adaptive learning algorithms, individual cognitive style integration, progress-based content modification, and real-time learning adjustments. So all of these are in development. So when we talk about what the future might bring, this is what we should be thinking about, because this, once it's there, it's very difficult to change the trajectory. So we are not really very much at the table, right? These things are just happening, and we are just participants. So I want to change that space also. So before we proceed, I want to understand how language shapes thought, because language isn't that I buy a little piece of translator equipment, right? That translates words. That is not what language really is. So how does language shape thought? It's a concept critical to language education. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, also known as linguistic relativity, suggests that the language we speak influences our cognition and perception of the world. Whorf in 1956. On the other hand, cognitive linguistics posit that language is deeply intertwined with our mental processes and experiences. And in the age of AI, these theories gain new relevance. As AI becomes a mediator of language learning, we must consider how it might influence cognitive development and whether it could inadvertently impose linguistic constraints that shaped thought processes. So when you look at some of the writings, many of our students use ChatGPT, they have a certain flatness to it because these are predictive models. And so I became an AI trainer to learn how this actually works. So if you imagine that all the world's words were like poured into one sack. Yeah. So when I say to you, Mary had a, how would you complete that? Mary had a, how would you end that sentence?
Little lamb.
Mary had a little lamb. That's right. So you just worked as an AI. That's the most predicted. You are predicting how the sentence is supposed to end. As a teacher, I'm going to say something to you. End it for me. Brown bear, brown bear. What do you see? It's a children's book. So if you are in early childhood education, you would know that. So there are, so there are anticipated endings, right? And that's called predictive interpretation. So now, collectively, in our experience, how many times before 2022 did we see the words delve, revolutionize, unleash? And I never saw the word delve, revolutionize, and unleash in any of my students' writings, ever. And most likely you didn't either, because the most revolutionizing that I ever read about was during the French Revolution and Fidel Castro, but it wasn't something that I would find in a normal essay that a student would write about a teaching methodology or total physical response. That was not a revolutionizing moment in language education, okay? But when I read this, I know that the AI wrote it because these are words that it likes. And when you look at what AI writes, it is very flat, emotionally very flat. So that's what I mean, that there is going to be linguistic constraints that shape our thought processes, because it doesn't just produce, but it also shapes the way we think. Think yet again, if you have Alexa in the house, who is training whom? Right? Who's training whom? So AI is already transforming language education. Adaptive learning platforms like Duolingo and Babbel use AI algorithms to personalize language learning experiences, adjusting content based on user performance. Natural language processing, NLP technologies, enable chatbots to engage learners in conversation practice, providing instant feedback on grammar and pronunciation. Moreover, AI-powered translation tools have become more used in even public schools. And they are featuring text-to-speech and speech-to-art technologies. And in such environments, students in the future might be paired with an AI companion capable of converting spoken language into text and vice versa. These AI companions would engage or could engage students in simple scenario-based dialogues, such as describing a favorite animal or planning a birthday party. And as these students speak, the AI might use speech-to-art technology to create those visual representations of the discussion topics, which are displayed in real time. So here we have it. So take a look below here. So, I mean, you have a cat, right? And you have a fox. I mean, so I'm trying to visualize how that actually might look like. This could be particularly impactful in educational settings where haptic devices may one day provide physical feedback as students manipulate virtual objects, creating a different learning environment. Johnson Glenberg in 2016 suggests that digital learning platforms that lack physical interaction can create a disconnect between the learner and the learning material, which may hinder the natural processes of embodied cognition. multisensory input could make it substantially easier for young learners to understand and remember complex language concepts. I mean, right now we are the largest social experiment that has ever happened. You know, we are in the age of the beginning AI, like in the age of Aquarius, and no one has done any long-term studies of what this actually does to us. Just like Ozempic has not been studied over long-term use. So we don't know what's going on, but we are participants in this space, in this shared space of exploratory, what I call intellectual surgery. So integrating visual feedback into language learning will be a very different space, right? Because you're talking now about whole labs. So now we are also talking about money. And what does this mean? That would mean that you talk about a real digital divide. So this is not an inner city school that is poor. And I've worked in the Bronx, I've worked in Harlem. Our schools had trouble getting windows that closed because the windows were so old, so there was always a draft going through, right? These are spaces, shared spaces of wealth also. So then the question is, who needs to learn language the most are people who go from one place to the other often, and I think it will happen more in the future, people who need to leave their countries due to environmental or geopolitical issues. And these people who are going to wander sort of in these migratory patterns will not be the people with power. And the question is, would they get environments like that? So this brings me to a new thing that I have developed, and I call it the dynamic trifecta. Teachers, students, and AI. So I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. So I imagine language learning in the future where the teachers are co-facilitators and co-learners, and the AI is a tool and participant, and the students are active agents of their own learning. So where learning occurs, where learning unfolds, and how it works, you know, where learning happens, all of these places are going to be negotiated. When you go into Google Classroom right now, in one of those virtual field trips, right, they're very interesting. But now let's think 15 to 20 years ahead, right? And imagine yourself as an English language teacher, or any language teacher. It doesn't have to just be English, right? And you are now in a virtual world or in a shared space. And you have digital autonomous agents, you know, who are not chatbots, but they're digital twins, maybe of a grammar teacher, or maybe even of you. Maybe they twinned you. And this automated you is in this virtual space 24/7, and students can actually go in there and now interact with the digital you, and the digital you is making all sorts of decisions away from you while you are asleep. So those are scenarios that are absolutely possible, because when we are talking about autonomous agents, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, that those are substantially different than a chatbot. A chatbot has information and can only give information that it's almost like a decision tree. They ask for X, I will give Y. They ask for A, I can give B. But an autonomous agent has the full ABC at their disposal. I hope I explained that the right way. So when we look at how learning might occur, it might occur not during school time when you are there, but with that virtual twin, right? That is out there in this wild west of the metaverse and is working with students over the weekend. So that could very well be that is already being worked on as we speak. So AI, while we use it as a tool, don't forget, we are also co-training it. Right? Every interaction that we have with ChatGPT or Claude AI isn't just that they're giving us answers. We are also training the language model. So we are a co-learner with them. And when students use this and they use it the right way, they become an active agent of their own learning. But we have to teach them, and we have to facilitate the use of the AI as a tool and participant so that students can become an active agent of their own learning. This isn't something that miraculously happens. I remember when I went to school, we still had household. Becoming a housewife was an important thing in Germany, and we had a whole class that was dedicated to making us very good little wives. And one of these classes was about sewing stuff like bed sheets and towels and stuff like that, and making your own handbags. And in this particular case, it was a jeans handbag, and the idea had always been that everybody knew how to do that, because all the other girls had mothers who had sewing machines at home, and my mother had no interest in any such things. She had very little interest in such housewifely endeavors at all, and I didn't know how to use it. So I was very much behind, and I was going to fail this class, thereby like having to repeat a grade. So the housewifely teacher locked me into the room with the sewing machines, of which we had 12, and told me, "You're going to finish this," right? Anticipating that I would finish this. Instead, because nobody had taught me the base work of how to do it in the first place, I broke every single needle in all of the sewing machines and was found curled up as a little ball, hiding behind one of them, thinking like, oh my God. So we can't assume that our students know how to do it. We have to actually teach them how to do it. And we have to talk about what it means when you interact with an AI, what it is that you're giving to it for free, right? What it is that are the dangers and the positives and the negatives. So this dynamic trifecta could enable personalized and adaptive learning experiences that not only reflect these complexities of the 21st century world, but also align closely with neurobiological mechanisms underlying memory formation and synaptic plasticity. So don't forget, there are a lot of people working on this stuff. So they are trying, these teams at these different places, they're trying to incorporate insights from behavioral psychology, cognitive psychology, and neuroscience to facilitate frequent and contextually relevant interactions. But we don't know what data they are gaining from that. So this approach mirrors neuroscientific findings that repetitive engagement and practice fortify neural bonds, leading to increased fluency and effortless recall of information. Basically saying, if you practice something 100 times, it ought to stick in your brain a lot. I am not quite sure if this is really true, even though that I found when I worked as a teacher, choral drills are very useful. When a student hasn't gotten it after a certain time, doing the same, if it failed, is not going to get you a better outcome if you do it 100 times. So then you have to do a different strategy. So going with something that now might be embedded structurally in terms of like how they envision a student should learn might be a very difficult way of working, because if they embed that structurally into a system, then if a student doesn't learn that way, what will we do? This is where we become a co-facilitator and co-learner, because we would have to negotiate this space. So let's go on. So personalized AI algorithms would adapt to individual learning styles, pacing, and preferences. So this would enable students to navigate their educational journeys. Accessible learning resources would be available globally. So I am trying to go to Burundi, and I've been told, what they really want, just like Brazil, they want to have this tech know-how from what is current, right? But the issues here are, again, the digital divide, because this centers now around the availability of infrastructure. And that is not the same everywhere. So the infrastructure at Westchester Community College is going to be much, much better than the infrastructure at a tribal school somewhere in Nevada, right? And so that's where the digital divide is going to happen, because if you are not in these served spaces, you might actually become left out. And then what would you do without a teacher like Leslie Painter and JASMIN Cowin and Claudia Carco? Because we are going to be the people who are going to go there to work with those populations, because we are not leaving any student behind. So, but when we talk about learning, this will become lifelong. Education will become a continuous process, supporting not only individuals to rapidly changing environments, but also supporting ourselves in rapidly changing professional landscapes. So we need to really reconsider the very fabric of educational systems, curricula, and pedagogical approaches. We need to challenge ourselves to design learning experiences that are flexible, inclusive, and responsive to both AI and our diverse students. Which brings me to the next thing. Embodied cognition is a fundamental aspect of language learning, deeply intertwined with our innate biological and physical expressions. As highlighted by Cosmos and Zephyrus, our cognitive processes are inextricably linked to our interactions with the physical world. Dewey, as you know, I said this before, concurs. The limitations of current digital platforms, which often lack avenues for direct physical engagement, can lead to a disconnection that hinders the natural development of cognitive abilities rooted in our physical embodiment. We are not a brain on a stalk. You know this. When your stomach feels sore and your head hurts and you're going into a test, even though you might be the superstar in this subject matter, you're not most likely performing at the top of your game, because the whole physicality of ourself is our brain. Just look at a ballerina or at a roofer who can like walk around on the roof without taking a second breath. That is an intelligence, right? I mean, I am not going to be a wind turbine repair person. That takes a different type of intelligence that I possess, and a complete utter lack of fear of heights. So it becomes even more important in the future to foster learning environments that prioritize real-world experiences, guided by teacher intervention and facilitated through group interactions. Such environments leverage our biological predisposition for socialization and physical interaction necessary for the holistic development of language skills. We all know that through our teaching. By integrating something like the total physical response and collaborative learning activities, we can create educational settings that fully embrace the physicality of our human experiences. And having everybody sit in front of a screen fosters I almost call it a space of isolation, a space of isolation. Everybody's on the same little island, and before we know it, nobody can talk to each other anymore, right? So we must also be mindful of the potential neurological changes associated with prolonged exposure to digital interfaces and information overload. A study by Zhao in 2022 suggests that screen media activity may impact neurodevelopment in youth, linking it to brain structural patterns such as cortical thinning. And as educators, it is our responsibility to stay informed about the latest research in the era, and develop strategies that mitigate any potential adverse effects on our students' cognitive development. Meaning we can't stick our students in front of a tablet, even if that sounds like a terrific idea in order to save money by many school districts. It's not going to get you the things that you want. There needs to be, however, more empirical research into how high levels of screen time can affect areas of the brain related to cognitive and emotional regulation. But I think that anecdotal evidence, which I believe I have noticed a lesser ability of students to negotiate shared spaces of discontent because they don't have the ability, both linguistically and mentally, to negotiate a disagreement, right? They fold. they disintegrate, but they're not able to use language and meaning making in order to negotiate for like a mediated outcome. So here's like, you know, I put it up here because I usually don't do that. Screen media activity may impact neurodevelopment in youth, right? Brain structural patterns such as cortical thinning. Those are moments that we need to reflect on, because while AI has a huge ability to help with, let's say, routine tasks, there are also dangers involved with it, and we ought to be able to, when we are asked, you know, to try out new technologies, to make a concise answer and reflection back by saying, well, I have heard following studies that this can lead to X, Y, and Z, and that is why I don't want to use it for 4 hours a day in a classroom of 30 students. To co-evolve our teaching practices effectively, we must strike a balance between embracing innovation and preserving the core values of education. Human AI collaboration, viewing AI as a collaborator rather than a replacement. This mindset encourages us as language educators to leverage AI strengths by recognizing the irreplaceable value of human intuition and empathy. Reflective practice. Continuously assess how the integration of AI and the reshaping of time and space impact learning outcomes and students' well-being and professional development. We have to invest in training that helps us understand what AI is and isn't. So when we look at the classroom dynamics for enhanced learning, and we want to implement AI-guided self-directed learning systems, you know, we hear very often that traditional teaching methods limit engagement, and engaged autonomous learners thrive in these AI classrooms. These are myths propagated by computer scientists who have never faced a classroom with learners, right? So, practical applications and implications. I have like 4 more. We need to do a dynamic skill verification for ourselves. So we need to have flexible methods to validate and confirm student abilities. Just because they score high on a test doesn't mean that they can actually use language in a real environment. It's much easier to speak to a chatbot in world than being at the airport and negotiate a canceled ticket or a double booked seat with a customer service agent who is in a real space and real time, right? I mean, I can have a script all I want. Once I meet the real person, or my tire blows out and I have to call, like, you know, AAA, all of these scripts are not going to be useful if I can't actually interact with others. You know, the world is not populated by chatbots, it's populated by people. We need to look at our teacher role evolution. We need to embrace this transition of teachers from traditional instructors to facilitators. And that means, and I will have another one, that means we really have to upskill. Otherwise, we will be outskilled, right? We need to really emphasize the importance of cultural and practical knowledge in education, a cultural pragmatic focus. We need to encourage creative language use and innovative uses in language learning. So you could actually like teach students how to write a song, and then actually use one of these AIs to like actually make the music to the song and have the students practice this music and the song and trying for them to pronounce their own creation. You know, there's a lot of stuff that you can do that actually have real world usage, you know, so it's not just a text, you know, multimodal. We can have a continuous competency evaluation. So ongoing assessment to measure student skills and knowledge shouldn't just be done online. It needs to be done in class. And that, again, is our space. Remember the trifecta. So you have the educator, the AI, and the student. And using this triangle to continuously reevaluate where we are, is an important part, I believe, in the future, in understanding where in this space are we right now. Is the student just interacting with the AI? And if it is, how can I be helpful in this interaction and create a better space for the student? Real-time proficiency tracking is going to be a reality, and it's going to be a contentious reality, right? Because if you're doing real-time proficiency tracking, that always means that you're looking for the outliers below and the outliers above, meaning that you're going to shed the outliers below and like sort of shovel them over to a different space and take the cream of the crop. And we all know that an integrated classroom is very important, because you want to pair your different group work with different types of knowledge. So if I have someone who's really, really good in grammar in one of my classes, I want to pair them very often with students who are not so strong in that. But then I might have a student who's not good with grammar, but they're very good with their social English, whereas my grammar specialist barely gets their mouth open because they're very shy. They are very good together. That is what I call dynamic grouping. And that's not something that your AI is going to do. That is something that you and me are doing, because we understand, and we understand the spaces that these students inhabit. And the spaces they inhabit are different hour by hour and day by day. A student can come in and have a bad day start and end up fabulous, motivated, or you can start really well and they can take a downturn and you don't even know what hit you because they turn on you. And that is not something that's sequential. That is something that's innate in our physical embodiment of our own body. So let's take a look what I think we all need to do. We need to really visualize what happens when we are documenting our student learning, right? So documenting of multimodal artifacts, creating student-generated learning data, and visualizing that student learning, because we need to be our own, we need to advocate for ourselves why we are here and why this is important. I also believe that design practice is the nature and process of the design of learning environments. So we need to think about what learning environments we are providing for our students, how they are different today and how they might be different for tomorrow, so that we aren't outskilled tomorrow, so that we are that we can function in a world that moves exponentially more quickly, it seems like, every year. Then we want to do knowledge creation practice through constructive dialogue of collaborative knowledge creating discourse with students. What does that mean? We need to ask our students not what you like and what you don't like. Tell me how this interaction with this technology felt to you. Tell me what happened in your head when you encountered it. Explain to me how you came to this result, right? Because understanding how they learned, let's say that they work with a chatbot or they work with a sequential system, we don't understand how they learned. We ought to be asking, I see that you were able to do it. Can you take me through how you arrived from point A? So remember, we documented, right? We documented the beginning. Maybe we had a writing sample, maybe we had a drawing. And then like 5 times after using whatever program they were using, they seem to be doing much better. Tell me how you got here. What happened? Because if I as an educator can learn how your learning improved, I can be a co-facilitator the next time, because I understand better what works for you and what doesn't. That's what makes me valuable in the classroom, right? Because then I can anticipate future issues and I can plan in a personalized planning session for you better than I did before. If I don't ask those questions, then I don't know. And then we need to look at our professional teaching practice and sharing our clinical and organizational and emotional experiences. And I mean, we meet up and we say, okay, we are all using X platform. This is what I observed. This is what you observed. I see that our students, after 40 minutes, they just like, they're like all bored. So what's happening there? Have we asked students what happens there? So we need to be able to co-construct and be part of that trifecta. We're not stepping back to the front and letting the AI do it. We are becoming a co-constructor of knowledge by trying to understand what happened in the learning process when they used it. Do I make any sense? I made all of, it's like this was a very exciting thing to do. I was very happy. So as we integrate AI into language education, it's not just important to address these critical and ethical considerations and policies, which include the impact on teacher-student relationships, data privacies and algorithmic biases, and the digital divide. We actually have to understand how our students learn from these, because nobody is asking those questions. They're just saying, well, we developed X, Y, and Z, and we know it works. But we want to know how it works. What happens in our students' heads? Almost done. So the integration of AI and advanced technologies in English language education or language education presents both exciting opportunities and complex challenges. The caveat is that our current exponential transformative processes involve more than merely adopting new tools. They necessitate a fundamental reevaluation of how these technologies alter teaching and learning and could potentially change our neurological structures. While AI can handle information delivery and basic skill acquisitions, it lacks the ability to teach complex human skills such as creativity, empathy, and ethical reasoning. As educators, we should focus on critical thinking, encouraging students to question, analyze, and evaluate information critically, creativity, fostering innovative thinking and problem-solving abilities, and the ever-present emotional intelligence, managing and understanding their own emotions and developing empathy for others. So, my concern is that the integration of AI into language education and the artificials stands at a critical juncture, serving both as a catalyst for innovative learning experience and a potential disruptor of established pedagogical practices. And this convergence should compel us and institutions to navigate these unprecedented changes that could reshape the entire landscape of language learning. And so we need to make sure that people understand learning vocabulary is not language learning. Learning another language is stepping into a cultural shared space of understanding. And that's not just vocabulary, not just where's the train station. That is being able to read a book or a poem like a Dostoevsky or a Goethe in the native language and touching those cultural spaces in your mind. And that is my presentation.